Hello, Rob here, and welcome to R&B Reviews. It's the 100th anniversary of probably my favorite silent melodrama from director D.W. Griffith and the Gish sisters, Lillian and Dorothy. The movie is called Orphans of the Storm. It is set in the late 18th century France before and during the French Revolution and explores the selfishness between the aristocracy and then under the dictatorship of Robespierre. D.W. Griffith is credited with inventing or popularizing many fundamental cinematic narrative techniques. He was the first credited filmmaker to realize that motion picture medium could exercise enormous persuasion power over an audience. He also experimented with editing back in 1908. He first used a cut-in from a long shot to a full shot to heighten the emotional intensity of a scene. And he was also known for taking shots from multiple camera setups, long shots, full shots, medium shots, close shots, and ultimately close-ups, and combining all of them into a single dramatic scene. Now, this movie actually came out on December 28th, 1921 in the United States, so it just celebrated its 100th anniversary. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Gish sisters, Lillian and Dorothy, Lillian Gish was a major silent film and stage dramatic actress. She is called the First Lady of the Cinema because she's responsible for turning film acting into an art form. She had an expressive face and eyes that could convey emotion through it. Her sister Dorothy, while had a successful career herself, mainly did comedies. But getting back to this movie, Orphans of the Storm, I first actually discovered this movie. My mom had a book on all kinds of silent movies, like they would have a chapter devoted to each film and everything, and this movie kind of looked interesting, and that's actually where I discovered Lillian and Dorothy Gish. One day when I was in college, I happened to be going through the card catalog, and they actually had this movie from Kino collection. I'm like, oh, I want to check this movie out. And I gotta say, after I was done watching it, I really loved it so much I kept borrowing it, and eventually I said, hey, I better buy myself my own copy, and this is the copy that I've had ever since. Alright, well anyway, the story of this movie, what is it about? Well, the story tells of two sisters, Henriette, played by Lillian, and her blind sister Louise, played by Dorothy. They become separated when they go to Paris in search of a surgeon who might restore Louise's eyesight. Henriette is kidnapped by an aristocrat for her beauty and is later rescued by a marquis who falls in love with her. Louise, on the other hand, is taken by a poor beggar's family and they use her. But soon the two find themselves caught up in the political climate there. Now, this was the last Griffith movie to feature both Lillian and Dorothy Gish since they started making short films for him back in 1912. Orphans of the Storm was a commercial failure following box office hits like The Controversial Birth of a Nation and Broken Blossoms. Now, Griffith used historical events to comment on contemporary events, in this case the French Revolution, to study class conflict and plea for inter-class understanding and against destructive hatred. The movie is about human condition in a traumatic event. The film really showcases Lillian's pantomime, and we can see her convey her character's feelings and care through her performance. Dorothy, I thought, was equally great as the helpless sister. Now, this film, I thought, really showed us that she's just as good of a dramatic actress as her sister. I really loved their sisterly chemistry in this suspenseful edge-of-the-seat drama. Yes, it's probably because the Gishes were sisters in real life, and so they probably took love for one another and was able to put it into their performances. The movie is full of high production values from the costumes and the sets, and I really like the detail in this movie. The aristocratic costumes are self-indulgent and kind of bordering on silly, while the poorer characters are dirt, ragged, and they're in darker clothes. The movie has great camera work, including camera movement, which I'll be honest with you, I didn't really expect in a movie this early. With the characters, there is a lot to keep track of, but they all play a big role, and they all intertwine with each other throughout the course of the movie. And it's also helped that the actors that Griffith chose have very distinct faces, whether it's eyes or cragginess or the way they convey their thoughts through their facial expressions. The Marquis that falls in love with Henriette, he's played by Joseph Schilderkraut, and he also gives a great performance as an aristocrat who cares for the people, and he uses his wealth to help people in poverty. For example, there's this wonderful scene where he sees people in poverty looking at a baker's window, and he goes in and buys bread for all of them. Another standout performance is Lucille Laverne as the abusive beggar who forces Louise into begging for her. This movie I thought was engaging, and I cared about the characters through their actions and the ability to bring feelings out. I personally was always, hoping that the sisters throughout the movie would be reunited and hope that the lead characters won out. The only thing I didn't like was there's a comic relief character who's a valet of the Marquis. I thought his humor was kind of out of place, and it was placed awkwardly throughout the movie. And some people, I think, might find the acting to be a little bit over the top. But I think it's an engaging movie with interesting characters, thought-provoking moments, and something I think is relevant even 100 years later. The movie reminded me about the lost art of silent movies, where the actors had to showcase their feelings and thoughts through body movement and facial expressions. So even if you haven't seen a silent movie before, I'd recommend giving this a try, and hopefully you'll like it. But I think it's a very well done movie. I cared about the characters, and I highly recommend it. Alright, well, that's my review of Orphans of the Storm. If you have seen the movie, please post your comments in the comment box below. Thank you very much for watching. And I have a lot of movie reviews on this channel, including classic movies, silents, movies from the 30s and the 40s, even movies that are currently available now, and even movies that are contemporary that you can watch in the comforts of your own home. So please feel free to check the channel. Please consider being a subscriber, and please give this video a thumbs up. Alright, thank you very much for watching.